Welcome to the Better Buildings, Better Society podcast. Twice a month, we interview interesting individuals and get insight into what they think makes building better members of society. Subscribe to our podcast and share with your friends. Hi, I'm Stephen Forster, founder and principal of DMA Engineering. My passion lies in the built environment and in the mechanical systems that keep buildings running at their optimum efficiency, while at the same time provide the best possible health and comfort to their occupants. In this way, DMA is absolutely committed to making buildings better members of society. This podcast focuses on energy efficiency through the eyes and experience of building industry professionals. Together with my guest, I will lead all of us on an exploration of how to build better energy efficiency buildings, how to save our clients time and money, and offer practical advice for those interested in the built environment. Join me, a mechanical engineer, outdoor enthusiast, and green advocate as I interview guests with leading edge ideas for creating better buildings and a better society. Hello again, I'm Stephen Forster, principal of DMA Engineering. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Better Buildings, Better Society. This week we have Nathan Kipnis, founder and principal of Kipnis Architecture Plus Planning. He is an expert in the importance of sustainability and energy efficiency in architectural design. He currently is serving on the AIA's newly formed board-level committee on climate action and design excellence, and has personal goals to participate with the design full net zero buildings by 2030. We are excited to be hosting Nate and are thrilled to explore more about how his architectural expertise can make buildings better members of society. With that, it's our privilege to welcome Nate to the show and learn more about what inspires him. So how you doing today, Nate?
I'm good. Good. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Yeah, you had a good holidays?
So far, so good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to schedule this earlier in December 2021, and the weather here in Colorado was such that the wind knocked out our power. So I appreciate you being flexible and rescheduling this.
There's resilient design aspects to that all over the place. So
exactly, right? We got to be adaptable.
Right. Weather is not a certainty anymore.
Well, and that I think that's just, let's just dive right into that for a second, because you brought it up, and we'll get a little bit more into your background. The weather uncertainty. What do you think that means from a design standpoint? And as us as professionals, we have to protect our clients. And so how are we going to do that going forward? I mean, it opens up a whole lot of, right? We have standards that we use, but now the standards don't seem to work. And so we're going to have to figure some stuff out.
Yeah, I think anyone that's designing a building now that isn't thinking about long-term changes is giving a client a dinosaur from day one. And we know the weather's changing, and you can't just design to the requirements that we've been following for years. You really do have to think about what's the weather going to be like, what are the hazards, what are the changes. So we talk to clients about that right off the bat. When they call us up, they know what they're in for, and that's one of them is resilient design. I think we here in the Midwest, where we have our main office, we look at super high winds, which you guys have out there as well, heavy rain events, power outages, and flooding. Those are our kind of main ones. We don't have forest fires here, but each area is different, and you have to really think about what are the changes that are coming. So is water a problem where you are? Are fires a problem? And then how do you design for that? And you do need to do that. And it's funny because some people just absolutely have no idea about this. But once you explain it to them, I think they're very appreciative, because a house, and we primarily do single family residential. We do multifamily, we do some commercial work too. But, when you're talking single family, that is the largest investment anyone's going to make in their life. And if they aren't thinking long-term of what the implications are, that's a big problem.
Yeah. And I know for us, we have changed the standard. The ASHRAE standard on cooling is a 1.15 multiplier. We've changed that to a 1.25 multiplier, just as our standard, right? So everything gets a factor of safety of 1.25 on it. That takes us to some pretty extreme conditions. We've gone back through a couple of projects that we actually have in process and applied that to it just to make sure we had enough factor of safety there. And if there were any issues, by the time we got through with equipment selections, we were over designed, so we were fine. But it's changing. I mean, we saw Portland, Oregon, 115 degrees, and then what is it in Canada? There one place went from a record high, and now they've had record rainfall within the span of less than 6 months. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I just remember seeing, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago. We're all familiar with that chart, the weather chart that has the different temperatures. They had to invent a new color for Australia, and some crazy purple or something. And that's not going to stop. That is going to progress. And you're going to see areas of the country that should probably have never been developed, like Las Vegas, potentially Phoenix, that were only built because of inexpensive power in the 50s. And really should, it's hard to envision them getting hotter. I lived in Phoenix I went to grad school there, and then I stayed there for a while. It's hot. And to have that ratchet up, I just can't even comprehend that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So, well, that another great segue. So yeah, give us a little bit of background about yourself. What brought you into the built environment? What inspired you to want to get into architecture? So what's been your journey?
Oh boy. Well, that's a lot there. I don't know, Legos and Tinker Toys and all that, Lincoln Logs. I knew I wanted to be an architect when I was 6. And I know that's crazy to say, but that's what, back in the day, it was like, fireman, policeman, race car driver, astronaut, and architect was kind of on the outer edge of that. But I wanted to do that. And I think my 4th grade art teacher tapped me on the shoulder and told me that too. And then the oil embargo happened in 73. I was 12 at the time. And it was freaky to see the adults panicking. And at the same time, I started seeing Popular Science and Popular Mechanics magazines and knew that, hey, they had solar homes. This is cool, except they looked horrible. And when I went to school, I went to University of Colorado in Boulder in 1979. They had a great solar program. And my goal going into school was to make great designs. That was the problem. I'm not sure I fully articulated it on day one, but over time, that's what it became. And then I went to Arizona State for grad school with emphasis in energy design consciousness, and got out in 85, all set to take over the world with that stuff, and no one cared. And it took a while, but I've always been, this has always been on my DNA aspect. This is not like something we just came to. I've never not thought about this. And then I started getting involved with, we won the, it was the Green Homes for Chicago, which was an international design competition in 1999. And that started a whole bunch of really good projects. But then I started realizing, we do 8 projects a year maybe, and we lecture on them, and I try and help people figure it out. But then serving on the AIA's committees, in particular the 2030 commitment, I started on that in 2009 when it first started. I was on the Chicago committee. And then in 2014, I went to the National AIA committee. And in 2018 and 19, I was the national co-chair of the 2030 commitment. And then I got on the Sustainable Leadership Group in the national. And then, like you said, the current one is the Committee on Climate Action and Design Excellence. So, I think that when I can have an impact, there's like 13 people on the committee, and we make policy for 90,000+ architects. That's very satisfying, and that I think it's critical to do that. Architects have a interesting position in that we're designing the buildings, and buildings are about 40% of the issue here with CO2. So, and then it's not just been about sustainability. It's been about, like we talked, resilient design, about wellness, and now social justice. And the AIA has this thing called the Framework for Design Excellence, which are 10 categories that follow those 4 aspects. So that's where we're at. And I guess one last thing is we do kind of regular homes, I guess, which is a rarity. some regular stuff, but architects typically do higher end homes, and then we also do affordable housing. We have a division that does super high end homes, and these are people that are ready, willing, and able to do what they need to do. Most of them are educated, they know this, but no one's helping them. And if we can get their homes to be net zero, that's a big impact, and then that impacts their friends, and hopefully that gets them to get on board with it. And I guess the first discussion we have is what size house, like not to have too crazy big of a house. It's a tricky conversation, but it starts with that and goes all the way through all of those aspects. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. And I mean, that's all good stuff. You at 6 years old, you knew what you wanted to do. I think that is awesome. I mean, I was fortunate. And I think those of us that can find that when we're young are very fortunate, right? Because I knew I wanted to be an engineer when I was very young. I didn't know what kind of engineer, but I knew I wanted to be an engineer. And so it just helps, right? I think
it's great when you can have a profession that at the end of the day you feel good about. And that's not everyone's that lucky. And I know that, so I think it's fun to design stuff, and we sit here and draw some squiggly lines, and then there's 10 guys out there building it, and it's like 30 feet tall and coming to life. It's fun. And the fact that we do performance-based homes, I mean, it's one thing to do a house that's pretty, but to do it that it is performance, that it's actually like really finely tuned. And then the thing we like is to combine them. And our tagline at our office is high design, low carbon, trademarked no less. But that is really the key. And I actually grabbed the website of zero carbon, high design, zero carbon, just to have, because obviously we're moving in that direction very quickly.
Well, the zero carbon thing is definitely, I mean, that's going to be interesting, right? There's a lot of embedded carbon in all the building materials. And I think there's a lot with that, and where it's sourced and where can you get it locally, and then the shipping cost. Typically, I mean, I was talking with somebody here in Boulder, Ron Flax at Boulder. You may know Ron, and we had a conversation about 1.5 years ago, 2 years. And it was just the cost of using mineral wool, but where it's manufactured, and by the time you shipped it, it's like, yeah, it's a good product, but by the time you take into the carbon from shipping it, you're better just using the fiberglass because it's made local, right? It's not the shipping distance is less than the embedded carbon in it just from transportation is there. So it gets intricate once you start getting down.
Yeah, this is the new frontier, is the embodied carbon. So everyone's been talking operational carbon for a while, and the embodied one is tricky. And there are limited, currently limited things. But like you said, the more you think, the more you go into it, the more you deep dive, the more you expose things that aren't necessarily correct. And you're going to find when you do the math that you're going to want to reuse buildings more and a lot of other things, and stay local and make, live close to where you work and all that good stuff, and not be in sprawled out communities. So we look back, just real quick, to basically right before World War II, those kind of communities that were kind of joined by railroads and had a dense downtown and had living setups, living arrangements right around there, or integrated into the downtown. That's really where we need to be. What we've been doing after World War II is not great. And, sprawled out communities are not a very good model.
So, I was recently down in Pueblo, Colorado this past weekend. We were driving around trying to find a place to eat. And with the holiday, there's a lot of places that were closed, and we were trying to find a little local Mexican place. So I digress. But that's an old steel town, right? So it's interesting being through that town. I've never spent much time in there. Pretty dense. You could see where the housing was set up, that people could just walk to the steel mill. So it's pretty dense. But then the new part of the town is definitely grown to the west of there, and then even to the east of the mill. So it's in a little bit to the north, and it's kind of abandoned that sole central district of a town. So you can see how that the old town, right, and then the sprawl away from it, and how that is going, and how we're making that happen, just the abandoning that old area of town, but which I think has a lot of character to it.
Yeah, it'll come back. I mean, that will be very desirable. It probably is very desirable now. It's funny, in the Midwest, there's like this prototype little town with the town square and the retail stores ringing that. And then, the density kind of slightly moving out, but then it stops. Railroad towns, very small, but dense and very livable. Those downtowns are coming back big. I mean, even looking at Boulder, the old part, Pearl Street Mall, right? There's a reason that that's so desirable. It's you can't. It's hard to replicate that, and that's a great use of embodied carbon. Can you imagine tearing that down, like back in the 70s, urban renewal? What a waste! And thank God that got passed over. And there's lots of towns like that made it through, and now they're super desirable.
So are you a big advocate then of multifamily buildings, with a lot more density? Are you a big advocate for the multifamily buildings? Do you think it's a big advocate for that in itself? Or are you like single family mixed in with some multifamily, or multifamily built on smaller lots? Where do you lie?
No, I mean, ultimately, multifamily is the best way to go. The density and the fact that, as you've got limited heat loss, and kind of put in the little packages of units, and they might have two sides exposed or something. We're about to move into a condo in a couple of weeks, and it's all electric. It's got a lot of good things. It's right in downtown. I'm a mile from my office, and that's the way more people should live. I think the market is going to show that. I think the resale of homes out in the suburbs over time is going to be a problem. There's a great book, I wish I could remember the name of it, that talks about how to convert suburbs into more dense places. In Chicago, you can look around and you'll see, like in like neighborhoods of Chicago, there'll be like, there's a bar on a corner and a laundromat and a this and a restaurant, and then the next corner there's more, but it's all interspersed into the housing, the dense housing that's there, be it multifamily or even single family that's fairly dense. And there's a way to do that with suburbs. I've not really seen it done, but I'll bet you anything that will become something to look at as we move forward.
Well, and I mean, as you mentioned that, so I live in the burbs in an 80s track house with Kelly, my girlfriend / wife now. We live, when we got together, that's where she put her at. I grew up in Wash Park area of Denver, and right. So we always have this discussion that, Wash Park, they're smaller lots. There's a lot of character there, but there's a lot of infill with the bars. And when you want to get out, you just go up to the park, right? So they built the communities around the parks, and that's very desirable. Where you get out in the burbs, the parks are far away. You have to get into a car to drive if you want to go out to dinner. Where if you're in those smaller areas, you can just walk to them and get your dinner, and build the local restaurant communities up. So that's one thing I like. So that's one thing between her and I that we struggle. At some point, I would like to have a condo somewhere in a big city, and then we'd have maybe a secondary place somewhere in the mountains that maybe she would reside out. It's a conversation piece, a fun one we have. So it's interesting. But so are you moving out of a single family place into the condo, or?
We did. We currently are in an apartment. Well, I do this every time I move. We move into an apartment while we figure out what we're doing. I can't ever coordinate a move from one thing to another and have it ready, because we do a lot of work to the unit or to the place. But yeah, we came out of a single family home. And, a single family home, on the other hand, is a very American thing, to own your little piece of land. But if it's small enough, you can still have like room for vegetable gardening and all that. And nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think ultimately higher density is the way to go. But I think small homes are great. And I think appropriately done larger ones are. I mean, this is what we wrestle with our clients. But, again, the discussion is, what's the right size to do this? You have to kind of guide them through this process. And it all starts with that first question. And sometimes they're very adamant about what they want. I try not to ever be kind of an eco Grinch or anything. It's what I want my clients to do is I give them information so that they can make informed decisions. And I honestly don't mind how they go. I don't get mad at a client. You can't do that. But, if I go, a shower uses this much water, it takes this much energy to blah, blah, blah. I want 6 shower heads. And I'm like, yes, it's your house here. And we've talked about printing up a really thick cardboard green mulligan card. And like, here, you get 2 of them, throw them down whenever you want. I want my 6 shower heads and I want a big garage or whatever. It's their house. I get it. But as long as they're listening to what we're saying, we hope to guide them through, 90+% of the decisions correctly. That's how we, get the projects to go the way we think they should.
Right. It's their money. We're the design professional. So we got to act as professionals, educate the client, but it's at the end of the day, it's their money. Right. So
we want to be a trusted advisor big time. I mean, that's really the bottom line is they're coming to us. I think with the internet, it's gotten a little weird where, I think in the old days, if someone said something that's an architect, attorney, doctor, people would go, okay, fine. But now we get checked every which way. But what they're coming to us for, they know what they're getting when they kind of, ask us to do a project. Of course, we're going to offer those opinions up, and then we want to see where they go with them.
Yeah. And I think, from design, I'd like to get your opinion on this, but it's from design these days, we have so many options as designers, right? There's not one size fits all there. And we have different materials. We got different schemes, if you will, to do the same thing, to get to the same point. So there's a lot of different tools we have as designers. It's not like, there's just so much more that we have, from, passive house standards to just code minimums and all those things, and where they're at in, if they're doing bold or a certain community, they have to do hers or offsets and all those things that make it fit to bring the project as challenges. We have a lot of tools that we can use now, which is totally exciting.
Well, I think we have gotten a lot of options. When I went to school, I'm a little older than you. When I went to school, it was all about natural daylighting, natural ventilation, correct overhangs, solar coming in, passive solar, and all these things. And now it's like, well, with the insulation so good and the windows so good, we don't necessarily need to do it that way. We can do it to take advantage where we can, but you can make a house not look like it would have in the late 70s or 80s. It's very different now. And those options give you the ability to do different things at different price points. So even when we do affordable housing, it's not that we don't have options. It's just we have less of them, but they're still going to work. It's just we kind of have to be very careful cost-wise. And that brings us, I guess, the discussion of the price of everything, which has been a problem. This is a challenging time where we're seeing the prices go up so much that thank God we do know how to do affordable housing, because some of those tricks come in handy at different price levels. I hope the prices come back down, but something tells me we're not going to see that. And so we're going to just have to roll with it.
You don't think that we'll get past, COVID aside, right? So you don't think the supply chains will get straightened out and prices will come down? You think they're going to be? I
think they will come down, and they have started to. I know lumber has started coming down. Plywood is still a bit of a problem, but I don't think they're going to come back to where they were. And I think that's one of the hardest discussions I have when people call me, is their notion of what they can get for X amount of dollars for a house. And it's tough now. Like, we did a starter home here in Evanston. And, I think with the land and everything else, it was 900 something. That's a starter home. That is not for many people anymore. And that was a struggle with them. And they made the decision not to go all electric on some of the components, which means not all electric. You're either all electric or you're not. And it was a shame. It was so close to getting it perfect, and they couldn't swing it. And it wasn't even that much money. And when you talk to them about what that would be on a 30-year mortgage, it wasn't that much money, but they were just at their end. And which reminds me, when we do run into problems like that or issues like that, set up the room for it and wire for it. And same with EV charging in the garage, and we understand that. But there's certain things that have to be done correctly that you'll never get a second chance. Insulation and other aspects of it, the layout, the orientation, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting when a client has to make a change, right? I mean, they can only, budget can only go so far. So how do you direct a client when they get to that budget scenario? Well, how do we guide them, right? We can guide a client through it. How do you guide them to make a good decision versus going all electric to gas? How does that happen?
Yeah. So we have kind of different levels that we want to talk about. The going all electric is a really important one, because if they don't, that's about 15 years before they have a chance to correct that. And 15 years is probably too late. So I really, really push that. But we have had clients not understand mini splits, for example. Just absolutely, I give them videos, I show them houses we've done. They don't feel comfortable with it. Same with induction cooking, which is funny because, all the top chefs are using induction. Induction's way better. We have a deal in Chicago at the GE Monogram showroom down at the Mart where their executive chef will cook us a lunch or a dinner on the induction cooktop and show the client and answer questions they have. And usually at the end of that, they're good. But that particular part is the thing that makes people's eyes roll, especially the cooks in the group. No, it's actually better. You just have to try this. So it's a brave new world in some respects, because there's a lot of things that people just, electric cars, what is that about? And solar panels on a roof and induction cooking. And you're telling them to do all these things. And the good thing is we've got lots and lots of examples that we can take them to. But, those first ones were a little, tricky to get them to understand that. And that was many, many years ago.
So we just built out our van and we put in an induction cooktop, and I'm with you. It's fantastic. I love it. It heats water so fast. I mean, it cools down fast. It is so awesome. I'm about ready to take our little electric range out, put in an induction cooktop in there. I love it. It's great. So I'm with you there. Couldn't drag me back to gas ever. So.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, the mini splits and getting people to understand that. And I think it's foreign to them to do the electric heating.
Like with the induction, the thing is, if you do everything else, if you have this super tight home and someone goes, "No, I want gas in there." You're like, "Really? You want to throw 20,000 BTUs of CO2 and particulates into the house?" It's really not going to be able to handle that. It's not your father's leaky home anymore. And so on top of that, so when you integrate in the energy efficiency, but then combine it with the wellness aspect, it starts to make a lot more sense. And I think it's great now that finally a lot of these pieces are available and they're cost competitive for the most part. The big sticking point with going all electric is we have to up the electric service. But in the big scheme of things, if someone's doing a house, that level of money, so you're paying a little more for the electric service. Big deal. It's not a big deal, especially if it's new. If you're switching it out, it's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing. My brother's an electrical contractor, and his big business is just doing service upgrades. Right? People want to get, the electric cars are definitely. He's seen a demand for the people doing the electric cars, so he's upgrading a lot of services from that. But upgrading it now, right? If you got to go and it's not that much that we have to go, especially here, right? I mean, if we're going to do air conditioning to go to electric heating, it's about a 1.2 on a well-built home, right? So the heating is going to be a little bit more, so it may push the service over on a slightly big, the cooktop could push it over a little bit more. It's not that, the cost to go to a bigger electrical service is not significant. And especially if you were to weigh that in about not putting natural gas to the site, right? If you take away that infrastructure and just think of upgrading the service, the electrical services. It's not, there's this trade-off there.
Sure. You're not paying the service charge on the natural gas every month.
Yeah. And plus, a meter for the gas that you may not be using as much. So there's all those factors that play into it on a long-term stuff. And like I said, on a 30-year mortgage, it's not a significant amount of money at the end of the day. So you've been doing this for a while, right? You came out of school and you were like, yeah, gung ho, gonna go this way at doing stuff. And then there was no market. So what's the big takeaway from there? So if you were to go back to that person, go back in time and take the knowledge and say, hey, what would that be? What would you say to your younger self?
You've seen Harry Potter movies where they have the invisibility cloak. When I got out in 85, 86, and I'm talking to people, it was if I had the invisibility cloak on. They were looking right through me, not understanding a word I was saying. I swear it was exactly like that. And it took until, the Green Homes for Chicago was a big deal in Chicago. And I was happy they had that. We had a very committed mayor. Mayor Daley was way into it. And that really was a good change where people slowly started to figure it out. And, every year it's getting clearer and clearer. And I would say this past year, 2021, has been an eye opener for so many people because of climate change being so obvious. And then just everything related to sustainability and wellness, and in particular, resilient design. One of the ways we talk to clients to get them to understand this is when they're lying in bed, about to go to bed, they're watching some screen, a TV, their phone, an iPad, whatever it is. And what are they looking at? They're looking at like landslides and crazy snowstorms and weather events, just crazy weather events. And what I tell them is when you're looking at that, that your place is good, that you can go to bed and have a good night's sleep. And I think that that's a powerful message. We also don't really want it to be like it's their castle and they're pulling the drawbridge up. We've talked to some clients about donating money to the local community for their resiliency efforts. We're going to try and do that more and more. But, I don't want this to be like, hey, I can afford it and everyone else is on their own. That's a horrible message. So we want to be more inclusive with that. And bring everyone up.
Yeah, for sure. It is interesting with what's going on, whether we touched about it in the beginning and all that. You came to school in Boulder area. Is Chicago where you grew up? Is that why you ended up back in Chicago? Is that what's the Chicago roots?
Yeah, yes, I grew up here, and honestly, this is the capital of architecture. I'm a little, I'm a little biased maybe, but this is like the land of Frank Lloyd Wright, Louis Sullivan, and and now the late Helmut Jahn, who's amazing, and just a lot of architectural innovation goes on here. I'm just very honored to be a part of the community here, and actually, there's a lot of great energy solar background here too. Keck and Keck was an architectural firm that did the House of Tomorrow in the 1933 World's Fair. It was the first house to ever use double glazed glass, 1933, had a dishwasher and had central air, also had a hangar, an attached hangar for an airplane, because of course that's how you'd be getting around, they thought. And when they were building the house in the winter, it was an octagonal glass structure, and the workers were so hot they had to just wear t-shirts when they were working. And they were thinking about that, like, what is going on? And so they started figuring out, and in 1940, they designed what they call solar home number 1 in Glenview, basically the first use of the word solar home. And they have a whole history of correct overhangs. They were working with Libby Owens Corning at the time. Fascinating background. So I am like a Keckaholic. I go and look for these homes. And that house was on the market right after I had bought a house. I would have bought it. And it's like having license plate number 1. And and it would be interesting to see what they would have done had they had the technology that we have, because their responses were just like I said, overhangs and daylighting and natural ventilation and stuff like that. But anyway, I couldn't resist it. It was tough not to come back here. And then it's also why then we've started getting back into Boulder. So that's kind of completing the loop. Is the thing about Boulder in particular is it's like the major leagues. Basically you're having to do a net zero house. Any normal sized home is really going to have that. And so it takes away the whole nonsense of us talking to a client. I shouldn't say nonsense, but the whole trick of trying to convince them to go net zero. It's like, yeah, that's just one of the things we need to do here. And right now we're working on something up in Sunshine Canyon, and we're hopefully about to start something right outside of Aspen. So I'm excited by it. We set up our flagpole out there January 1st of 2020. New decade, right? Didn't quite work out perfectly, but we're still going for it, and I think it'll be great overall. I just love being back out there. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, Colorado is definitely a special place. I have not honestly spent much time in Chicago, so I can't speak to the Chicago, but definitely Colorado, the Front Range is definitely a special place.
But I think not funny, but the great thing was, I was there starting in the autumn of 79. And to be in a community where not everyone, but the vast majority of people understood sustainability back then and lived by it. It was the first place I'd seen passive solar, first place I'd seen solar panels. You see double wall construction and these really cool fireplaces. I'm like, wow, this is pretty darn cool. And I just love hanging around a place that really gets it. So that's one of the main attractions, honestly, is to just be a part of that community. And, I hope our design aesthetic is a good thing there.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you're gaining traction, right? We ran into 2020, right? And networking events and everything was hard to springboard, but you're gaining traction. So that's awesome, right? So you're getting projects. Can't beat that. So that's good stuff. So what are you currently researching that is got your curiosity?
Wow. So that's a good question. So the embodied carbon is the big deal. I give lectures quite a bit. And maybe once a year, I do a national lecture. I just gave one for Architectural Record in conjunction with Vectorworks, which is our CAD company. And it was about embodied carbon. And, I know a lot about this, but when you give a lecture, you have to kind of take it from what you know and make sure there's no one in the audience that's going to ask a tricky question. So, it pushes me to learn more and more about it. And so that to me is the thing right now, is trying to get a quick handle on that. And again, not that I don't know what it is, but the more I learn about it, the better it is for the work we do. That's been a big one. And then the other one is really deep diving on backup power. It's getting easier. All this stuff is getting easier. Like I said, back in Boulder, it was guys from Radio Shack that were doing the solar. You couldn't find a normal person. These were a very special breed of person that could even figure this out. And it was plug and play years ago. And so I think the battery backup thing is getting to that point now where it's getting much more standardized. There's apps, there's smart ways to do it. And everyone kind of understands that. But that's still kind of semi-uncharted territory. And especially when I talk to people, this one is really tricky. We had years and years ago, I had been giving lectures on the fact that if a house goes out of power and you have an electric car, you can still plug the car in, but you can power the house off the car. Well, that was a little too early. You had a couple car companies that could do it pretty clunky and now that Ford F-150 can do it, although it's, I guess, only a 7 kilowatt setup, so not very big of a power system. But you're going to see that actually in the smart grid and kind of sending power around and arbitraging power. So buying it low, selling it high, helping the grid out. And that's been another thing, is just understanding how the grid works. I was at an AIA lecture a couple of years ago. maybe 400 people in the audience. I was in the third row. They go, who here's done a house with battery backup? I put my hand up. They go, oh, we got one person. I turned around. I'm like, you're kidding me. And we had done that like 12 years before. But now that's becoming more and more normal. But the price of the batteries has to come down. And more importantly, we have to look at where the materials are coming for the batteries. So Argonne National Lab is right outside of Chicago. One of the guys that I know is the head of the battery division. And so what they're looking for is not just cheap batteries, but batteries that aren't, or efficient batteries, but batteries that don't come from bad countries or don't use bad materials or are easily recyclable. And so this has been the focus that they've been working on for years. And I think that's what we're starting to see. You've even seen Tesla move away from the cobalt and lithium to more nickel in their batteries, which, nothing's perfect. But I always laugh and go, I don't think the coal plants were very perfect ever. Like, you can't make that argument with me. Like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good, and we always want to move to the grid, and the grid will get cleaner over time. Every day there's more and more renewable coming online. So that's where I'm at.
And I think we have a huge opportunity to set up the battery system right and say, yes, right. The batteries are here. There's some stuff in there, rare earth metals and all that. And we need to figure out good recycle for those as we go forward, right? What could we do with a battery? A battery that's used for transportation and it's, it could go to, right. It could take it out of that car, put it in the house, recycle it for different things because the use is different. So
you can downcycle that thing pretty easily.
Yep, exactly. And then you can monitor how far it could go down. So there's a lot of different stuff with that. The smart grid thing, the smart grid thing is one of those things. It's interesting how long it's actually taking to get that to be a thing. I don't think there's enough inertia there to do it. I mean, I was talking about the smart grid 10 years ago, and I'm like, really, we're still having issues.
Well, I have friends that are like way into their cars, way into their crazy cars. And I show them my electric car and they're like, what's the range on this? And I try and explain to them that it's not the same. It doesn't matter. Yesterday I drove up to northern Wisconsin and back the day before, 2-day trip, and big deal. So you supercharge, big deal. It's like so easy to do. And I tell these people, I go, do you not think if we only had batteries and electricity 100 years ago, we wouldn't have figured it out? Like, are our engineers that stupid? No, they would have figured it out. And we just have this inertia of crazy subsidies for fossil fuels. If they're not subsidized, you look at Europe and gas is like $9 a gallon and they have little cars. The reason it's subsidized here is so gas is cheap, so people will buy big cars. There's been a lot of thought about how that all works. And we just need to get things priced correctly. I mean, that's one aspect. But the other thing is, like, a lot of the things have gotten cheaper anyway. So solar power and wind are now the cheapest sources of power, period. And electric cars, honestly, are working their way. In my mind, they already are cost competitive or even better. Like, I have a Tesla. And if I compare it to another car at the similar price point, there's no maintenance. The power to run it is next to nothing, very little maintenance. It's just the whole overall process is so much better. And I always joke that if I can't have the loudest car, I want the quietest car. So that's what I got. And I love it. And I can't imagine any other way to do it.
So I was having beers last night with the high school buddy or childhood buddy, actually knew him before high school. And he's a car mechanic. We both into cars when we were younger. And yeah, he's going to buy an electric car, right? Here's a car mechanic going to buy an electric car. My Prius, I'm still on the fence about the electric car.
I'm on my fourth one. I'm at 8.5 years now. There's no way on earth I'm ever going to go back.
So yeah. And I at some point I'm going to pull the trigger on the electric car. It's probably going to happen in 2022. I don't know yet. We got some other things strategized, but so yeah. What car do you have now?
I have the Model 3 and I've driven it to Colorado twice. And my wife makes a big deal about how many extra stops we have to do. I'm like, it's an hour and a half extra. And if that's so, there's always the easy answer. Let's just keep using this and destroy the world. Or okay, I put up for an hour and a half extra and I've got a screen in there and I can play video games or watch whatever. Or I hate to tell you, but I can't drive 6 hours straight. I'm just not, I have to go to the bathroom. It's like, you can't do that. So you do have to stop periodically. Big deal. And it's the same with a lot of things like, hey, you can continue to use this toxic material that has this one or two advantage, or we can do this and it's going to either cost a tiny bit more right now. Maybe there's a little more maintenance, whatever. If this is what it takes, then that's not a big deal. Like, just do it. You will be happier. The planet will like you better. Okay. There'll be better karma coming your way.
No, yeah, for sure. And a lot of people on the podcast have been kind of getting on me about still driving the Prius. It's pretty funny. So
I had a Prius. I had the first Prius, that second generation one, the one where they made the big design change. I had the first one in Evanston, which is saying a lot. I bought it sight unseen, and I never do that with a car. I mean, it's insane. I went to the dealership. I go, I'm interested in this car. I've heard about it. Can I see a picture? They're like, no. Do I get a discount? No. I'm like, all right, I'll take it. And that was a 5-month wait. I thought that was the end of the world. The Tesla took 2.5 years when I ordered that on day 2, which put me at 400,000th in line. Silly me, but I worked my way up somehow or another. People didn't stick around, or I don't know what. But yeah, I got it 2.5 years later. That was strange, very strange, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. And now you can get it. Now I think you can get a Model 3 like in 3 months. Every time I've looked, it's about 3 months.
Well, now there's a little bit of a backlog because of all the supply chain stuff a little bit. But, there was a point where you could just go get one. It's not a big deal.
So what direction would you like to see the industry as a whole take in the next few years? And, I know you're pretty active in the AIA 2030 challenge and then the Climate Action Challenge. So from that, what you're working on there, what are you imparting on the industry that you want to have? You mentioned earlier, like 90,000 plus architects. What are you hoping those architects will take and go forward with?
Well, so I sometimes have to pop my little bubble that I'm in, because I always think that like everyone knows this stuff and everyone should be excited about it. And I remember I was at one national AIA event, and this one was focused on 100% of all the topics were on sustainability. And Al Gore was the keynote speaker and all that stuff. And I overheard at lunch these two guys going, "Do you believe this stuff?" Now, this was years ago. "Do you believe this climate change stuff?" And I'm like, wow, really? There's architects that don't get this? This is crazy. And I do get to see the studies that the AIA does. 93% of our association, our professional group, understands climate change and are in favor of all this, and 7% don't. You sit there and go, who are the 7%? But that's a pretty amazing number, 93%. I mean, most of the time, it's 50-50, 55-45, whatever. But this is very much, but we still don't have people engaging to the level that obviously they need to do. We know from the 2030 commitment, and I should know the number, and I don't, I get out of the committee for a year or two and I don't keep up on it. But, we had like something like, I think there's like 800, 900, 1,000 firms that are signed on, but we don't get even that many of them reporting, like maybe 60, 65% are reporting. And we need to make those numbers go up. We need to get more people reporting. More people signed on, more people reporting, and then better performance. Those 3 things have to happen. And I know from being in the committee, and I'm a smaller firm, we have 6 people, and they have different types of voices on the committee. So there's people, at Gensler with 3,000 people, and there's firms that are 500 and firms that are 100. That the bigger firms, the huge firms, are all engaged, and they kind of have to be. There's some of them are publicly owned. There's some liability legal aspects to that like, hey, you knew this and you weren't doing it. They're all on board and they're reporting and they're doing a great job. Not enough small firms are involved, but the small firms are relatively easy. Like all that has to happen is the principal wake up one day and go, I'm signing on. They don't need to economically justify it. They don't have a partner that they need to convince. It's those middle firms I'd say 25 to 100 that are the problem because they don't have the resources that these huge firms have, but they have enough internal discussion that it's tricky if everyone's not on board. And so we, at the AIA, we're trying to really systematically figure out what are the kind of pain points and the points where we can have an influence and then give them the info that they need. So I'm excited. I mean, it's so funny because we do all this great work and we have so much fun doing it. But I get very excited about trying to get everyone to understand this and to get on board and do it quickly. So that to me is the big struggle. And there's firms that either just don't have time. There's the occasional firm that just wants nothing to do with it. And we joked that we were trying to get a lecture together called How to Light a Carbon Neutral Fire Under Your Boss's Ass. Because there's a lot of old principles that, I don't want to deal with this. I've done fine for however long and I'm going to retire and who cares. But there's all these people that are employed there that are younger, that totally are motivated, that want to do this. And how do you get your boss to do it? So the people in the groups I'm in are excellent. Like they're really trying to figure out like, okay, let's go after, the manufacturers, let's go after the code officials, let's go, like every single part of this thing, the students, like let's make sure they're learning this in school. So they're very hireable and desirable when they come out of school. Really comprehensive. It kind of blows my mind how organized they are going about this. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of working on, as well as doing really fun, great design.
Yeah, for sure. So if you had extra money on a project, how would you recommend a client use it?
Well, that never happens.
Never happens. But if you're like, hey, we found.
No, I'm kidding. If I had extra money, oh my God, that is a good question.
Or what's the one thing you wish every project would incorporate, but typically doesn't mainly do?
Well, I think batteries have been like a huge game changer, and they're not cheap. And they're on that decline that solar panels were on 10 years ago. Solar panels have kind of leveled off. I mean, they're still getting a little bit cheaper every year, but not really that much. Batteries are really dipping. So what we've been typically doing is asking people if they want to do batteries, let's get one in and leave room for one or two more. Or there's certain companies, Sonnen and others, that have a cabinet that you can fill up. So let's fill it halfway up, get that tax credit, because you can only get the tax credit when you originally purchased the panels and the batteries. And then over time, when those come down in cost, let's make sure you get it and get better with that. I think that's kind of I don't know, maybe that's too nitpicky, but that's, I wish that the batteries, because that's really changing everything. Because it's one thing to be all electric. It's one thing to be really tight. It's one thing to have solar panels. The utilities hate the solar panels. I mean, honestly, it's producing power from 11 to 1 when no one's using that much power. We've started, because the panels are so cheap, we're starting to put them east and west. It's helping the utilities out, to the little bit that we can help them. But the batteries are the game changer, because now we can store it, use it, arbitrage it. Maybe they don't like the arbitraging part, but I think that's where we're headed, between the electric cars moving power around and interesting ways to store power. But I think batteries are kind of the big deal. And that's like not an architectural thing. That's a technology thing. But, and then in a house, if just architecturally, we're getting really big into light shelves. I think that's like our fun design element. It really helps with the daylighting, blocks the direct sun, and is a really cool feature. So that's something that about half the houses we're working on somehow or another have those.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's a cool feature. Yeah. So what's an example of a design mistake or failure you experienced, and what'd you learn from it?
Doing this for decades, there's plenty of them. And I joke with people when they're trying to, we're getting bids from other architects. I go, well, you can use them for your art, their R&D research, or you can use us because we've made those mistakes in the past and we know what we're doing. But, Yeah, insulation. Long ago, I was getting very mixed messages. Even from guys whose names begin with Joe. I won't say any full names here, but giving two-sided info all the time, and you're like, I can't decipher this. And so there were some things way back with insulation that I wish we could undo, but you can't. That's going back a long way. Yeah, and then there's like the house that got away, where we had the house, the best, most sustainable home we'd ever done, just a beautiful design, and they could not understand the air source heat pumps. This was one of the examples that I mentioned earlier when we were talking. And they went from being extremely efficient down to like in the upper 50s, better than baseline. You're just like, so close. And for what? And they just wouldn't do it. And it wasn't the low income, the starter home. This was a no problem, could have done it, and just didn't want to do it. So those are painful.
Yeah. I think on the insulation one, I think there's a lot of stuff still in the industry on insulation. A good material installed improperly is bad. I mean, I think there's a lot of room in the industry to improve on insulation even today. Even with all we know, there's still a lot they can do with the insulation. I think even, like you said, mixed messages on this versus that. I mean, I think that's still going on in the industry. And
just the open cell versus closed cell, when to use it. If you go back and look like 15 years ago, it was not well articulated. And I mean, I'm happy that there's so much science going on. And that even when they had a lot of science going on back in the day, I don't think they got it quite right. But now there's been so much. We're a big fan of the Green Building Advisor. That's one of the pay sites that we love. And there's others like that you can get on, Passive House and many of these other ones. But I think the community the intelligence level has really gotten quite good. There's still crazy stories you hear of people with like bubble wrap silvered insulation stuff. And, there's still this kind of carny aspect to some of it. But thankfully not very much. And usually those get picked off pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Still works to be done there. So what is your favorite building and why?
I remember seeing that on your list, and I was kind of thinking, and I go back to Frank Lloyd Wright a lot in a lot of ways. When I was a kid, when I mentioned Keck and Keck, there was a house 3 doors down that was a Keck and Keck from where I grew up, but there were Frank Lloyd Wrights in the neighborhood. I mean, it was pretty amazing to grow up with these things around. If you look at Falling Water, I don't know if you've ever been there, but Falling Water is amazing. And it's all these cantilever decks and everything. Yeah, structurally, he was way too far ahead of himself. All sorts of problems with that. But you look at it and go, hey, that's south-facing. Hey, that's a concrete floor inside, and it's dark. And you just and there's a tower and there's operable windows up there. Like, he kind of had it figured out, I think. I really like Falling Water. I don't know that anyone's ever done an analysis of that from a sustainability, energy standpoint, but and it's fascinating to think what he would have done with the materials that are available. When he did those homes out in California, he did these concrete block homes. The concrete was terrible because he just didn't have the technology, the materials set up to do them. But, and just to let him have a computer would have been just crazy with the patterns he does and everything, or did. I just think a lot of his houses in particular, but that one, Falling Water, and, no surprise it gets ranked in the top 10 all the time, top 5, sometimes the best house. I think Architectural Record had a list of the top 100 homes in their centennial issue, and that was number 1. And not surprising.
And following up on that, what is your favorite place and why?
Well, I would go to Boulder. I think that is a very special place. I just love it there. getting a little too expensive of late. I wish there was a way to wind that down. I wish there was a way to not have everyone have to commute in because they can't afford to live there. I know that's on their radar. They know that, and they're trying to deal with that. But I think the positives of a place like Boulder, any of these places that are, well, that one, Boulder's such a special place because of its location and everything else. And plus, I've just got a natural attachment to it. But I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to say Boulder.
Fair enough. Biggest lesson you learned in the past year about creating better buildings?
Oh boy. I think it's just knowing that it's the synthesis of sustainability, resilience, wellness, and social justice. And that last piece has actually probably come into focus a lot this last year. And it's the hardest one. We've had this discussion, Stephen, about like, I don't like snow melt. I would rather pay some guy in the neighborhood to come out and shovel and keep the money in the neighborhood and not have a boiler that's gigantic just for that thing. So, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of prefab buildings. I'd rather have the guys build it. Now, I can see some of it being panelized. I know there's advantages, but like I am a big believer in keeping the crews working. And I know that's not necessarily racial justice, but it certainly could be, but it's social justice. I think houses have gotten so expensive that the least we can do is make sure everyone's working on them and not having robots replace us.
That is a very good answer. That's very interesting. And I know you and I have talked about the snow melt.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, we're working on something about snow melt too, and I'll add that in there because I think that's an interesting aspect. So yeah, it's very good. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how would they go about getting a hold of you?
So our website is kipnisarch.com, KIPNISARCH.com. I do have a number in Boulder. It's the same. It comes into this number. I'll just give the number I can remember, 847-864-9650. I'm always around. So, and love doing interesting projects. So they don't have to be super high end. They can be, as long as they're interesting. That's kind of the key thing. But yeah, please call if you got a cool project.
Sounds great. And I thank you for taking the time out of the holiday week for doing this podcast and being patient with the reschedule due to the weather issues we had here. So I really appreciate you doing that. And thanks for participating in our little podcast here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And it's very interesting how the industry is changing from, you came out when you first graduated, nobody would, you thought you were wearing an invisible cloak. Now people are listening to us. I think that's very interesting. There's a lot of things that are changing in the industry. It's changing fast. Being cued in on technologies with the batteries. I think that's a very, from an architecture standpoint, to be looking at the batteries. I think that's very forward thinking. I think that's great, right? I mean, anything we can bring to the client and educate them a little bit more in what's out there and what they should be thinking about is very, yeah, that's good, right? I mean, it's going to push the needle even further forward. So that's great. I want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast. Keep, go to the website, dma-eng.com, look at the podcast and for this podcast and more. So thanks everybody.